wanna explain about the analysis from BSNP. There are 8 categories for each chapter to analyze in the textbook based on the BSNP. And then the sub-components, the first is the compatibility with core or comprehension and basic competence. And then in here there are completeness and in-depth. It is about the material in the each chapter. And then the second is the accuracy of the material. And then the third is supporting material. In the accuracy, there are social function, element and structure of meaning, linguistic feature. And then to support material, in the BSNP there are relevance, development of life skill, and develop of diversity insight. And here about the score to analyze, there are 4 scores. The first score is 1. It means not good. And then the second, or the 4 number is not really good. And then the third is good. And then the 4 is really good. And then for each chapter we found in the chapter 1 the material are complete as listed in basic competence. It is also based on the syllabus of 9th grade. It is to understand spoken and written text of congratulation. So here the text is about congratulation, and here is appropriate for the students. And in the chapter 2 it is fulfill the criteria also based on the syllabus. In the material is about congratulations, so the students will explain about the congratulation after the teacher give the material. And then the chapter 3, it is to identify product and describe some product. It is about the material. And then the chapter 4, the purpose of the text structure and language element from spoken and written. So the student must write the material to describe some product. And then the chapter 5, the students will communicate activities of speaking 1. It is to practice the speaking of the student. It is also about describe some product, so the student have to practice in front of the class with their partner. In here, in the point of the time past and futures. And then the chapter 6, the students are expect to understand the spoken text, like how to share information with others. And then the chapter 7, students are expect to be able to understand the story. It is about the student to understand the story. And then the 8, the students are able to make passive voice. And then the 9, the material list in accordance with those contained in basic competence. And then the 11th chapter, the student understand the message content because the song easy to understand. Those categories, the first chapter until the last chapter about completeness. And for the explanation in depth, the chapter 1, in this chapter provide the exercise students to explore more about how to express congratulation. And then chapter 2, it is provide the exercise in the text for students. In the chapter 3, it is present giving advice and comparing products. And then chapter 4, students are comparing and identify information. And then the chapter 5, it is explore how to share information with other people. So the student have to share information and practice. And then the chapter 6, the chapter provide training for students to explore more about how communicate with other. And then the chapter 7, to know how to solve the problem in the story. And then the chapter 8, the student learn about passive voice and try to match about the exercise. And then the chapter 8, it is chapter 9, to create a student look for a job, for a verb. And then chapter 10, the student analyze the differences from short advertisement about goods and service. It is the material about advertisement. And then the last chapter, they require students to complete the sentence. And for accuracy of material, for the social function force, chapter 1, there is part of interpersonal communication. The chapter 2, it is describe the material. And the third chapter, to explore kind of product, how to packaging product like food, drink, and another. And then the chapter 4, to analyze label of product. And then the chapter 5, students explore communication and respond in the text. And then the chapter 6, the text relating students' daily life that show attention. The chapter 7, the student can distinguish which good and bad characteristic in folk tales. So in the story about the folk tales, the chapter 8, the chapter fulfill the criteria of communication function. And then the chapter 9, the students are perceived, communicating and interacting. The chapter 10, the form of advertisement and analyze the material. And then the last chapter, to expect to fit the context of interpersonal of students. And then for the element and structure of meaning, chapter 1, it is appropriately because the students are taught to do a simple conversation. It is the score is 4. And then the chapter 2, the element and meaning is well implementation. The chapter 3, the level is difficulty because the text not clear. And then the chapter 4, the student given example of presenting. And then the chapter 5, it is implement in systemically way, like interaction with their partner. And then the chapter 6, the communication providing even in the past. And then the chapter 7, the students are able to asking and giving information. The chapter 8, to know the criteria of the text. And then the chapter 9, this chapter fulfill the criteria with the context. And then the 10th chapter, or the chapter 10, to know the difference from advertising of goods or not. The last chapter, to ability of students at grade at junior high school. And then for linguistic feature, the first chapter, the text used as simple commonly used in the daily life, so they can practice in the daily life. And then the chapter 4, it is intent communicative context. The chapter 3, describing product when the student difficult with the vocabulary, so the student have to ask what are the difficulties of vocabulary in the text. And then the chapter 4, it is to be able to describing a product. And then the chapter 5, the text appropriate in using simple form and vocabulary. So it is the score is 4. And then the chapter 6, student learn how to use the right language. The chapter 7, the folk tales are familiar. So why familiar? Because to easier the student in the story. The chapter 8, this chapter easy to understand in the conversation. And then the chapter 10, the students are only asked for knowledge and there is no interaction. And the last chapter, the student learn about the pronunciation in the other song. For supporting material, it is the A or the first is relevant. The chapter for the first chapter illustration in this chapter is accurate with students' daily life. And then the second it is show correctness material. And then the third, student easily to understand and identify the product. For the chapter 4, the product available in and easy to learn. The 5th chapter, the illusion appropriate with students. And then the 6th chapter is accurate with activities in the context of daily life. The 7th chapter, it is good or appropriate for the students. And then the 8th, the chapter has relevant in the context. And then the chapter 9, to support the student, each picture and text show a picture how what is being studied discussed. And then the chapter 10, this is to discuss from the text with the illustration. And then the last chapter, the lyric has meaning about feelings or parent toward the children. So in the last chapter here is about the song lyric. And then for life skill development, the first chapter, the students are taught to interact with other people. And then the material for for the chapter 2, the material cover information. The chapter 3, to distinguish the content of product and can choose what they want to do. And then the chapter 4, try to making knowledge use information. Chapter 5, the aspect develop element in this chapter. And then the chapter 6, the students are taught to interact with friends. And then the chapter 7, the students are taught to learn the moral value. It is the moral value of the story. So the student know about the moral value. And then the chapter 8, to motivate the student explore further information. And then the chapter 9, this chapter covers academic and social skills. And then the chapter 10, the students are taught how to understand the meaning of short advertisement. The chapter 11 or the last chapter, the student can develop the use of sentence through practice questions. So the student have to practice in front of the class with their partner. And then the last is about diversity inside. There is no aspect of development of diversity inside in the chapter 1. And then the chapter 2, there is no aspect of development. The chapter 3, the material describing product. The chapter 4, it is not include cultural elements. And then the chapter 5, the text and exercise don't include any cultural elements. And then the 6th chapter, this chapter not aspect of development of diversity inside. And then the chapter 7, this chapter include Indonesian culture values about Sangkuriang story. So the story about Sangkuriang, or it is happened in the past. And then Chapter 8, the content have fulfilled criteria like craft, art, food, and then the chapter 9, this chapter covers the wording of diversity of Indonesian culture. And then the chapter 10, there is element about knowledge in animal, and in the last chapter there is no aspect of development of diversity inside, so the score is 1. So based on the result, the SNP, the conclusion, visibility of content frequency, total 8 categories being acknowledged in 11 chapters and fulfill the requirement from the rubric assessment. So the score, it can be concluded that 78.57% material in the textbook think globally aged locally for 9th grade of junior high school fulfill the requirement of rubric assessment from BSNP is appropriate for the students 9th grade. Okay, thank you.